Welcome to the All Eers podcast, powered by HD Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into a new edition of the All Eers podcast, a WVU-based athletics podcast here at the Charleston Gazette-Mail. I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. You can follow me on social media at Taylor_Kennedy7. You can also find us on all of our social media channels by following us on Twitter at Gazmail Sports. That's G-A-Z Mail Sports, on Facebook at HD Media Sports, and on our YouTube page, HD Media Game Day. Packed show for you guys today and even later in the week on Thursday. We'll get to that here in just a second, but for today, we're going to go a lot of different routes today. We're going to talk about baseball here in a second. We'll have Vingle's Views this week. We'll be joined by former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle for his weekly take, I should say, from everything regarding WVU athletics. We'll talk a little bit about Wren Baker with him coming up in our second segment. Then in our final segment, we will highlight Cam Cook, the new running back for the Mountaineers, rushed for over 1,600 yards at Jacksonville State last year, and he played 2 seasons at TCU. We'll get to that later on in the show. But as I mentioned, WVU baseball, how about that weekend that the Mountaineers had? Took 2 of 3 games in Tempe, Arizona, defeating number 22 Arizona State in 2 out of 3 games, including a 9-5 win on Sunday to take the series over the Sun Devils. And what a fantastic outing in all 3 games. But in those 2 victories specifically, WVU was plus 10 in runs against Arizona State, 22-12. The one loss that they had, they lost 14-4 in the game 1 of the 3-game series. But fantastic outing, really quality wins. Their 3rd series victory this season in Big 12 play. They won the series against Baylor and also won the series against BYU. Now add Arizona State to the list. WVU will also stay out west this evening. As we are recording on Tuesday, they will take on the Arizona Wildcats in Tucson, and they will play at 9 p.m. Eastern time. None of that 6 p.m. West Coast, none of that 5 p.m. None of that 7, 8, none of that. We're Eastern here. We're an Eastern podcast. We got to stick to it. 9 p.m. Eastern, Arizona and the Mountaineers. Break to take here on the All Eers podcast. Coming up in our next segment, we'll be joined by former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle for his weekly views of Vingle's Views here on the All Eers podcast.
HD Media Sports is your one-stop destination for top high school and college sports coverage in the Mountain State. From Morgantown to Mingo County, our award-winning reporters keep you informed about your favorite teams and players, including exclusive coverage of the Marshall Thundering Herd and the West Virginia Mountaineers. Follow HD Media Sports on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest news, features, and game coverage.
Oh, good gravy. The kind made from real premium sausage. The kind that's smothered over deliciousness. The kind you can only get at Tudor's Biscuit World. That's the gravy that's oh so good. It's the perfect topping to your biscuits or your taters, and even makes a delicious side. It's oh so good gravy. Tudor's Biscuit World. We're dripping with oh good gravy.
Welcome back into the newest edition of the All Eers podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. Thank you all for joining us. However you may be listening to us, you can find us on socials. Links are in the description. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube as well. As I mentioned in our first segment, the weekly edition of Vingle Views is here. We are pleased to be joined by former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle. Mitch, welcome back to the program. I should say you're a weekly guest. I got to get into the routine of saying welcome back.
Right. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited about being with you each week and having some fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to bounce around a little bit, but I want to talk a lot about Wren Baker because obviously with your knowledge of WVU athletics, you've also been able to work with some really good and well-known athletic directors at West Virginia University. So let's start talking about Wren because I've been adamant about how much Wren has done for the university, both from a university perspective, but also from an athletics perspective. And I want to ask you this just to kind of lead into our main discussion, but you've been able to work and see a lot of different athletic directors at WVU dating back to your days covering the Mountaineers. How does Wren separate himself compared to other athletic directors that you've worked with?
Oh my goodness. you have to understand, when I was at the student newspaper at WVU, the Daily Athenaeum, I first met Fred Schaus. They called him the Stomper, and he just came from coaching the Los Angeles Lakers. And I'll never forget, he was such a big man, and he looked at me. I was 150 pounds back then. He looked at me like I was a little pissant, and I'll never forget being intimidated by Fred. But I didn't really work with Fred. I worked with, Eddie Passalong, Oliver Luck, Shane Lyons. And I've met Ren, and I've watched what he's been doing. And, they're all so different. I mean, each one, made their contributions in different ways. I think, Eddie Passalong, everybody loved Eddie. Everybody, he was just, he is just a great guy, him and his wife, Mona. And, he did a lot because of his relationship with Mike Pushkar. It was his best friend. And, of course, the stadium's named after him. And it was just an incremental deal, starting with Eddie to get West Virginia into a Big East football alliance. And then he got him into, the Big East as a whole. And then, of course, Oliver Luck comes along and, he moves West Virginia to the Big 12 when West Virginia had nowhere else to go. Saved the Mountaineers from playing, today they'd be playing in the AC, playing ECU, Memphis, or an independent like UConn, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he spearheaded the baseball stadium, which was huge, and hired, Randy Mazey, who brought the program along and all that stuff. So, and then Shane Lyons, was a best friend for Olympic sports and all that. But I think what really is making Ren Baker a name for himself is the way that he embraced NIL when Shane Lyons did not. And I think that was the big thing. Of course, he's Ren to me is kind of an energy guy. He seems very organized, done well in fundraising. I think he's had 6 offers to go elsewhere, but I think I had a chance to speak with him up at a Salvation Army luncheon up here, and he thinks he can get the job done in football and in basketball. Even though West Virginia may not have the money of Texas Tech or Texas or Ohio State or some of these other programs, but he seems pretty confident that he can get the job done here. So we will see. I think the thing about Ren is, he's hit on coaches like Kellogg and Sabins, and the one thing I think people are still holding out for is to see if he hit on the big ones, if Rich Rod and Hodge, both pan out.
No, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that, because I think the other note that I want to kind of tie in with that is Ren has either hired or promoted at least 5 different coaches within the athletic department, with 3 of them coming from men's basketball. It started with Josh Eiler after the whole Bob Huggins thing. Then we saw the whole thing with Darian DeVries and how that panned out. Now you get Ross Hodge from North Texas, who he's familiar with. So I'm with you. I'm interested to see how the men's basketball side of things, along with the football side of things, bringing back Rich Rodriguez after being with Neil Brown for a number of years. I'm curious to see how that pans out in that realm. But along that line, whenever you see an athletic director hire or promote at least 5 different personalities to head coaching positions in literally less than 4 years being at the university, what does that tell you about who Ren Baker is?
Well, I just think that he's, is he one of those guys? I was never big on these hiring firms. I get it to maybe give you a little list or everything, but I think what Ren has been able to do, and again, we will see whether his big hires pan out, is to look beyond what's on paper.
Mm-hmm.
To look at more the person, more the work ethic, the intelligence, their, especially within their sport, and make choices and be determined. I don't know what you would call it, not determined, but be solid, confident in his choice. And I think he is. And I think he's, like I said, I think he's a very energetic person with a lot of confidence, and I think he has a lot of support from Mountaineer fans. So that's a big deal. Like we talked about the other day, people have connected with him, and they trust him.
You mentioned earlier, actually a couple minutes ago, about how you've been impressed with how Wren Baker has embraced this new landscape of collegiate athletics, especially in the name, image, and likeness realm. What have you seen Wren Baker do in kind of, I don't really want to say adopting, but more so just being open-minded to that compared to his predecessor in Shane Lyons?
Yeah, well, and I think that was, and I'm not going to say the downfall of Shane Lyons, because Shane has had a terrific career and
Agreed.
continues to at Alabama.
Agreed.
But I was, after I moved from the Gazette, I went into marketing with Wheelhouse Creative, and one of my accounts that I brought in was Country Roads Trust. We did some stuff with Country Roads Trust, so I saw how Oliver Luck and Ken Kendrick started Country Roads Trust, and to try to help, because they were getting out ahead of the curve when it came to NIL. And so it was kind of cool. Here I am on Zoom calls with Ken Kendrick and Oliver and all that stuff. And I was, I saw what was going on there, and they were really trying to help. And I think Shane Lyons kind of balked at how it was all going down. I don't think he liked the NIL and all that, and I think people were ready to help. Everybody was ready to buy the beer that, part of the money went, to the collective and all that stuff. And so when Wren came along, he embraced all that, and he shepherded it, along to where it is now. I think he was very plugged in to the way that the NCAA was moving along and trying to deal with this. And I think he handled that so well that's a big plus for Wren Baker.
When talking with Wren personally, I feel what you're saying, because I agree with you. The energy that he provides to the university, I think, is a breath of fresh air in a lot of different areas, especially from what you just said with Shane Lyons. And I agree with you. I think Shane had a fantastic career. Obviously, people remember him from the end compared to the transition actually into the middle and the peak of WVU getting into the Big 12, and then obviously getting into and starting to slowly move those gears in this new area of collegiate athletics. But the energy aspect of it with Wren, I think I also agree with you in a lot of different ways. When you see a guy that's so passionate, that's not even from West Virginia, because obviously there's been a lot of guys that, and women actually, that have come into West Virginia, adopted the state, adopted the university, but now you're starting to see Wren Baker kind of take that to a next level. You're seeing a lot more social publicity for the state, which is a lot, and he's also been really adamant as well about local economics and how much of a driver that is, especially from how WVU and the city of Morgantown and Monongalia County can kind of work together in that. What stands out to you about that whenever you have a guy like Wren that's not from West Virginia, but is taking a step further in adopting West Virginia while also trying to market the state of West Virginia in a much broader light?
Yeah, I go back to Oliver Luck, which, I've known. I graduated with him. I remember he and I were about the only ones in our class who graduated in 4 years. All my buddies were on the 5-year plan or 6-year plan. But I go back to the blueprint that Oliver set down, and that was, the new baseball facility. He did the TIF. He worked with the city of Morgantown, And I think Wren has continued that. And that's the way to go. I mean, I've always thought for years, and, this is way off the topic, but, how the college football playoffs, I always thought, the first round should always be, at the home of the higher seed, because think of it, all the money that those cities make rather than giving it away to the Sugar Bowl or wherever they were placed. And so I always think that the community, the near community, the state, is something to always keep at the forefront. And I think Wren is continuing that. And I think that's just a great thing for the Morgantown, West Virginia area.
Yeah, one last thing about Wren, and I'm also agreeing with you, just him being open-minded to continuing to build on current West Virginia infrastructure at WVU, whether it be the press box at Milan Pushkar Stadium, upgrading premium seating at any of the venues. I'm with you. I think his enthusiasm to be more open-minded about that has been very pivotal in WVU's shift towards staying competitive in this new realm of collegiate athletics. You also mentioned baseball there with the new baseball facility at King Kendrick Family Ballpark there in Morgantown. And let's talk about that, because last week we talked about your perspective with how women's basketball has grown. Obviously, the baseball team has also had a fantastic run since the turn of the decade, and even before that, hosting the regional in 2019 with Alec Manoah on the mound. From your perspective, from where WVU baseball was 20, 30 years ago to where it is now being one of the more competitive teams in the Big 12 Conference, how have you seen that evolve into what it is today?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, in the old days, it was, I guess the word that comes to mind is hard scrabble. I mean, they were Southern Conference, Atlantic 10, Big East. Dale Ramsburg, he was there for 26 years. I mean, he was beloved. It was unfortunate he died suddenly, and then they brought in Greg Van Zandt and everything. But, I mean, I remember sitting in Old Holly Field, behind the Coliseum. And there was like me and, 8 girlfriends of the players, watching the games. There was just no atmosphere. And actually Rammer, they called him Rammer. He did pretty well. I mean, for what he had, I think he had 4 NCAA appearances. He poached Darrell Whitmore from the football team. Had Steve Klein had a couple, but it just wasn't, what it is now. It's a far, far cry from what they have now. When we're regional champs the last 2 years and winning the Big 12, going to the Super Regional. I mean, that was just kind of a pipe dream back then. And then, Randy Mazey, you have to give him all the credit in the world, because when he came in, even though the stadium or the new ballpark was being built, he still had a pretty tall task of elevating WVU, from in one of the best college baseball conferences. I don't know if it's now what it was, but still to try and be respectable, first of all, within the Big 12 at that time was a really tall task, and of course he did that, and so now you've got Mountaineers going to winning the Big 12, going to the NCAA tournament, going to super regionals. It's just a different world, and it's really, really neat to see.
Speaking of Randy Mazey, one of his guys has had an impressive start to his career at the major leagues, and that is J.J. Weatherholt. What a fantastic start that he's had to his career. Second at bat, his first career hit, solo home run, then got a walk-off hit just the other day. What a fantastic start for J.J. Weatherholt, speaking of West Virginia baseball.
Well, that, and, I mean, think about it. With St. Louis Cardinals, now you've got 2 Mountaineers in the starting lineup.
Victor Scott. Yeah.
And Weatherholt. And, you always kind of cross your fingers when kids are rookies and you wonder how they're going to do, how they're going to handle it. And Weatherholt's already a star in St. Louis, and it's just a tremendous thing to watch. I remember watching Alec Manoah, and I remember when he was first recruited and signed to at WVU, and for some reason, I don't know why. I mean, I never wrote about recruits, baseball recruits, but for some reason he jumped out, and I did a story for the Gazette, and I just followed him the whole way until what was he, second in Cy Young voting, I think, one year.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he's fallen off, but you just love to see when kids take off like that and make something of themselves in a brutally tough. I mean, every pro sport's brutally tough, but baseball, man.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So, Mitch, we appreciate your time as always here on Vingle's Views, your weekly stop in, drop by, whatever you want to call it. We appreciate you here on the All Eers podcast, and enjoy the week, and we'll catch up with you next week.
All right, buddy. Look forward to it.
Yep.
Take care.
Thank you. That is former Charleston Gazette Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle. Break the take here on the All Eers podcast. We'll talk about WVU football and new running back Cam Cook on the other side of this break.
HD Media Game Day is your streaming home for the best in live high school sports across West Virginia. Featuring football, basketball, soccer, and more, HD Media Game Day brings the action to you for free, exclusively on our YouTube channel and at hdmediagameday.com. When you can't make it to the game, HD Media Game Day has you covered.
As the game gets faster, stronger, more dynamic, your equipment has to keep up. Introducing the Riddell Axiom, the next evolution in football protection, designed to match the speed and strength of today's athlete. Contact West Virginia Riddell representative Casey Turley at 304-552-5960. Gear up, play smart, stay protected.
Final few minutes here of the All Eers podcast. You can follow us all of our social media channels by clicking the links in the description of this podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. As I mentioned in our first segment, we'll spend a little bit of time here talking about new Mountaineer running back Cam Cook, who transferred in from Jacksonville State, and he also played 2 seasons at TCU, which we'll get to in a second. But you look at the numbers that Cam Cook produced last year with the Gamecocks. 295 carries for 1,659 yards and 16 touchdowns last season. What an unbelievable season. But take this into consideration as well, okay? As a team last year, WVU rushed for 1,928 yards on the ground, okay? If Cam Cook were on WVU's team last year, he would have accounted for 86% of the team's rushing total. And then for context, WVU did not have a single running back. Get this. I want you to sit down for this. WVU did not have a single running back rush for over 400 yards at all last season. And whenever you go on and look at the notes, you'll see gain, loss, net. You want to look at the net on the website. They did not have a single back rush for 400 rushing yards last season. They didn't even have somebody rush for 5 touchdowns either. So what Cam Cook's bringing to the table, obviously a lot of experience, and Rich Rodriguez really does love what he's seeing thus far out of Cam Cook, being one of the veterans in the room. We'll get to that in a second. But one more note before we get to Coach Rich Rodriguez, I should say. WVU has only had 2 running backs since 2000, or even in the history of WVU football, rush for at least 1,600 yards in a single season. The first one was Steve Slayton in 2006. The other one, Amos Zaraway in 2002. So here's Coach Rodriguez talking about the veteran leadership and what Cam Cook brings to that running back room.
He's the only veteran guy, right? I mean, that we have in that room. And so he's not a rah-rah guy, but you could tell he's got experience. He's going to, we've limited him in the live stuff because I know what he can do. And he's got to be the alpha in the room. But that's a good competitive room. We got a couple of the guys that aren't here yet, but Cam's going to be the leader of it.
Here's another note for you. I know I threw a lot of different nuggets at you to begin this segment, but the other thing is this. WVU does not return a single running back that rushed for a single yard last season. There's 5 running backs in this year's room, with Cam Cook being the top back in regards to experience. But then you take into consideration, okay, who is the highest rusher to return to WVU this season? None other than returning quarterback Scotty Fox Jr., who rushed for 201 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Cam Cook's going to be thrown around a lot of different ways, whether it be in the running back area, in the block game, in the pass game, whatever it may be. He's very diverse in his game. And one of the guys that he was attracted to get to WVU, that attracted him to come to WVU, I should say, is offensive line coach Rick Trickett, who was also the offensive line coach at Jacksonville State last year when Cam Cook rushed for 1,600 yards. So here's Cam talking about Coach Rick Trickett.
How he pushes those guys, like every day is a grind. And you can see it from like him, the way he coaches his guys makes you want to work harder. Like it makes it seem like you're not working hard enough. So I say just like how he coaches his guys, you know.
I mentioned early on in the segment that Cam Cook played 2 seasons at TCU before spending last season at Jacksonville State. He actually played WVU on September 30th, 2023. He actually got in the game, carried the ball twice for 8 yards, but WVU was victorious in that game, 24-21. And in his 2 seasons at TCU, he totaled 518 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns, with all 9 of his touchdowns coming in 2024. So what are Cam's recollections of playing the Mountaineers? Here's Cam talking about his memories playing WVU.
I will say I was a freshman when I played in 2023, and I was just trying to get out there and put my best foot forward. So I will say that I have changed a lot since then.
How so? Where have you improved?
I think I'm a bigger back. I'm faster, smarter. Like I know what's going on, like on all sides of the field. Not just what the running back is doing, but how the O-line is blocking and where they're trying to get to. So that helps me out a lot.
One final clip here from Cam Cook, and he talked about being a leader. And oftentimes with college football players nowadays, it's interesting to see how that dynamic works of being a new guy, but also trying to assert yourself as being a leader. I mentioned the 5 running backs in this running back room for WVU. 2 of them are freshmen, one of them being Amari Latimer and the other one being Chris Talley. So how has Cam kind of approached being the new guy in the room, but also being the experienced veteran in the room? Here's Cam talking about being a leader.
I tell guys what like experiences I've gone through and try to help them in that way. But mostly I say I lead by example. And going back to just doing whatever my coach is saying, like whatever he says is what needs to be done. So just leading by example and then helping out, like whatever little things that I know help the game go faster for the other guys in the room.
Well, that'll do it for us here on the All Eers podcast. We appreciate however you're listening to us, whether it be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or even on YouTube as well. Again, you can follow me on social media at Taylor_Kennedy7. And we will see you all on Thursday with a very special guest. Don't want to give too much away, so be sure to keep up to date with us on all of our social channels, and we'll see you all then. This is the All Eers podcast.
You have been listening to the All Eers podcast, powered by HD Media.